Welcome to the university's Project Changemaker, all funded via our own University Silver Award team. And there are two phases to this project. I know some of you have already heard this, but we've got new people joining the programme. So phase one, to attend the guest lecture series. At the end of the week, to submit a 60-second sales pitch. Now, you're going to receive an email, but also a message, possibly at the end of this session by myself, specifying the link, and also to submit it this coming Sunday evening via WeTransfer. The successful students, the top 15 successful students, will then be put forward to a virtual placement, 6 weeks, half a day a week, negotiated between the student and the employer, and that date can change. It's quite flexible. Looking at an organizational challenge or a problem. At the end of that, the student will then present their recommendations to a solution or solutions to the problem. In return, those students will receive a certificate of attendance, a Game Changemaker trophy, a testimonial, and £150. Furthermore, the top 4 students whilst on placement will receive an additional £500 and to work an extra 2 weeks on completing their initial project with the organisation. So, I'd just like to welcome you all to Wednesday's guest lecture, and our presenter is Stuart Junk. Stuart has enjoyed 2 decades in the corporate banking industry after graduating from the University of Sunderland in the year 2000. Having worked his way through the ranks, he is currently Assistant Vice President at the largest Japanese bank, Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group. Based at our Amsterdam subsidiary, he works in the transaction banking. His team encourages large multinational corporations in continental Europe to deposit their excess liquidity funds with the bank. Each deposit can be hundreds of millions of euros or dollars. But prior to that, he used to work in the London branch of the same bank for over 12 years. Stuart's presentational title is From Just Managing to Managing Millions, a global journey from living off £25 a week student loan to looking after hundreds of millions of euros in a corporate cash. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Derek, and also for inviting me onto this series. I gather it's a week-long series of talks, and I think it's a great initiative. Just looking at some of the bios of some of the other speakers, some very successful people in there. So not sure why you picked me, but thank you very much. My name is Stuart Junk, as Derek mentioned. My story is one of working, getting a position at a global corporation and sort of developing my career there. I went to Sunderland University from 1996 to 2000 and studied international business with German. And in fact, one of my lecturers was Mr. Derek Watson. So it's actually nice to catch up again after 25 years, Derek. I remember your lectures on organizational behavior were quite notorious. If you turned up at the lecture theatre 1 second past 9 o'clock, the doors were locked and you were turfed out. But I've never been late for a meeting since, anyway. So, as Derek mentioned, I work for MUFG, Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group. It's the biggest bank in Japan. It's the 5th largest bank in the world by assets. We've got about 140,000 employees worldwide. Profits last year were about $5 billion. And we own approximately 25% of Morgan Stanley, the US investment bank. So for my presentation, I'll talk a bit about what I did prior to joining MUFG and also after my career after joining MUFG. And also I'll wrap up with just what I would say to my 22-year-old self after having been through this, what advice I'd give myself if I was to do it all again. And I'll try and elaborate on the areas which I think may be of more interest to the audience. I'm guessing most of you dialing in might be in your early 20s, undergraduates, or just on the cusp of graduating, or maybe just graduated. So I'll try to talk a little bit more about the bits which will be more relevant to you. And if you find any of it useful at all, great. So as far as my background goes, I am from a little town called Carrickfergus, which is about 10 miles north of Belfast, just up the coast. I went to a grammar school, Carrickfergus Grammar School, from 1989 to 96, which was fine. Grades were fine, but I think towards the end of my my school years, I think I really had the feeling that I wanted a complete fresh start. So I actually looked into the idea of studying at university outside of Northern Ireland. And for me, England was the most attractive choice. That's nothing against the great nations of Scotland, Wales, and the Republic of Ireland, but England was attractive to me, and I knew really the southern part of England was going to be prohibitively expensive. So I looked at Northern England. And this is going to make me sound really old, but there was no internet really back in 1996. It was just on the cusp of getting big, but the average household back then didn't really have internet. So, armed with my UCAS handbook, I flicked through the pages and looked at the universities in Northern England, and I knew that I wanted to study European business studies. Because I enjoyed the numbers aspect and excelled at languages at school, more or less, particularly German. So I thought European Business Studies was the course for me, and I knew that the third year of that course would be spent in Germany. And looking at the universities listed, Sunderland seemed to be the only university that had that specific course. So I applied and thankfully got an offer, and I went off to Sunderland in 96 when I just turned 18. So, and I actually remember I've never been so nervous. I've lived I've been lucky enough to live in numerous countries, but I've never been as nervous as that day before I left Northern Ireland to go and study in England when I was 18. I found it quite terrifying, but I went off and I had a great time. I lived at the Forge, which was newly built back then. I think the university itself was maybe only a couple of years old back in 96. Obviously, it was a polytechnic before that. I lived at the Forge and, made friends for life, really. One of them lives 5 minutes away from me now, and 6 of us had a Zoom catch-up a few weeks ago. And the great thing, of course, about halls was, for me, people studied in all parts of the university. It wasn't just business students, so that was great too. And obviously, I enjoyed the nightlife aspect as well. Manor Quay was very, in the mid-late 90s, Manor Quay was huge. I should probably say, I think it's called Northern Shore now, I think, unless it's changed its name again. I hope I'm right. And Thursday nights, we often went to Pizzazz. And I Googled this. I believe it's called Illusions now, but Pizzazz was a great night out as well on Thursday night back in the mid to late 90s. I studied at St. Peter's campus, which again I believe is called Sir Tom Cowie campus now. It was great. The course itself was wide-ranging, which I really liked. And I took German lessons at Forster Building with Heidi Gritzen. And just had a normal student life and really enjoyed it. So the third year was spent in Germany. And I have to give massive credit to the university here. Excuse me. They did a great job in finding me a placement in Germany. They found me a placement in Pfizer, which, looking back, I wish I'd have bought shares in that place now. It was located in Kiel, which is in the northern part of Germany, the extreme northern part, just under the border with Denmark, near Hamburg. And I worked for a subsidiary of Pfizer called Halmedica, and our team organized conferences where our sales reps would sell orthopedic instruments, prosthetic limbs, things like that. And doctors and surgeons from all over Germany would come to these conferences, and our team was responsible for organizing them. So it was a great early experience, hands-on experience for me in business. It was quite a strict office, as you might expect, but it was a very good experience. And I also had a good life outside the workplace. I studied German at the Technical College. and it was a good time. But it was also the first time. It was a real eye opener in Germany. It was the first time I sort of widened my perspectives a little bit, and I could see. I lived in the university halls of residence, and just looking at the European students from Continental Europe, I could see that they didn't really graduate until they were 24, 25, 26. And so I thought, well, hang on a minute, is it just the British and the Irish that graduate so young at 21, 22? And I thought, well, if they're not graduating until the mid-20s, then I'm going to, explore, see what I can do. So I actually made a list of things I wanted to do by the time I turned 25. That was my list. And I ended up carrying that list around in my wallet for a good 20 years. So I didn't actually complete this by I was 25, but carried it around really until it a bit. But thankfully, I'd saved that list elsewhere by then. But I can't remember everything I wrote, but basically, I thought, what do I want to do? I've got one more year left of education. What do I want to do afterwards? Because I'm pretty much going to be free then. I thought, well, I speak a bit of German. Actually, it's getting on the way to becoming fluent. I'd love to be able to speak French, speak Spanish. I'd love to be able to speak Japanese and Chinese, et cetera, et cetera. Certainly Chinese never got off the ground, but and that involved obviously traveling and living abroad. I wanted to cook better. I wanted to become business literate, properly computer literate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, had this list and carried it around for a long time and worked off that. So I then went back to do my final year at Sunderland, and I remember I was definitely a lot more focused for my final year. Why? I guess because I worked in the office in Germany and had quite a strict work ethic, very hardworking people, and that rubbed off to some extent. And the father of my girlfriend, my German girlfriend, there, was a successful businessman, and I think he owned he was the owner of the largest retailer of bicycles and mopeds in Berlin and Brandenburg. So I was very impressed by him. And then apart from that, of course, I had pretty much no money. So I couldn't go out and enjoy myself if I wanted to be honest with you. So all those reasons mixed in together made me, very focused on my final year. And I think, I basically had a student loan to live on in my final year, which was about £1,200. And about £200 that had to go on rent, because I did get a grant back then. They were back in the days of grants as well. But that didn't pay for all of my rent. So about 200 of the student loan had to go on rent. So basically, I ended up with about £1,000 to live on for, the academic year, about 9 months. So I had to, eat, very economically, things like ridiculous things like McDonald's was probably out of the question, really. It's just supermarket food all the way. And I studied. I sat in my room and studied. Obviously, had my flatmates as well, which is great. But the course went fine in my final year. I ended up getting a first for the German module, and all the business side I got 2-1s, and my course was more geared towards the business side. So I ended up with a 2-1 overall, which was great. And then I graduated in the summer of 2000. And I remember just then again being completely penniless. So I thought I want to go abroad. I knew that I wanted to go abroad at that point after the year in Germany. But at that point in particular, I really just wanted to earn some money, pay off my student overdraft at the very least. I mean, the student loans could wait. But at the very least, pay off my student overdraft at the bank, which is about £1,000, and build up some kind of funds ready for my first sojourn wherever it was going to be. So I got luckily enough, my German lecturer Heidi Gritzen at uni knew of a job at a call center in Newcastle doing German speaking work. So it was activating American Express cards for wealthy German people, basically. So I did that for 6 months, and then I spent 6 months working at I think it was a wallpaper manufacturing company in Cramlington in Northumberland. That was also German-speaking work, and at the same time I worked in a bar in the West End of Newcastle, which was an experience in itself. But all good, and after a year after graduating, I was getting to the point where I'd had some funds, and I thought, okay, let's start preparing now. I'm in more of a position to go abroad now. So I knew that at the call center in Newcastle, there was a girl who I think she'd studied at Newcastle, but she had a fascination with Italy, and she wanted to go to Italy. And I vaguely recall that she did some kind of teaching certificate and then went out to Italy after that. So I actually gave her a call and said, look, this sounds interesting. What did you do? What is this qualification? And she said, no, it's great. It's called a CELTA. It's like a Cambridge University qualification. It's like a 4-week intensive course, 9 to 5 every day. You do a few essays, and you teach every other day to sort of guinea pig students. You can do it at International House in Newcastle. And she really sold it to me. So that's what I did in late 2001. So just over a year after I graduated. And the other good thing about International House was they had a good network of schools across the globe. So I thought, if I do my qualification, my CELTA qualification there, maybe I could apply for jobs internally within International House. And if I got lucky, I could, get my first job there. So I did that. I got my qualification, and then I started looking for a position. And this I remember very well. I was 23 years old. I remember the excitement actually of just sitting in front of a computer after I'd got the qualification, and literally just scrolling through, looking at these jobs all over the world and thinking, I'm 23, I'm free, I can just apply for whatever one I want. Whether I get them or not, it's obviously a different matter, but I found that absolutely thrilling. So it was a great experience. And so I really ended up choosing, I wanted to stay in Europe as my first move, but not Western Europe. I wanted to see maybe a different side of Europe. So I leaned more and looked more towards Central Eastern Europe. And for me, I find Hungary fascinating, and the city of Budapest very alluring. It's obviously a beautiful city, but the idea of learning Hungarian as a language fascinated me. I'm still a little bit of a language geek, and so I took an interview there at International House and got the job. So very happy about that. And in January 2002, I flew off to Budapest to teach English as a foreign language. So at International House, of course. So it was great. I taught English to all levels. I taught kids English. I taught exam English. I taught English to adults, all sorts, and met some really good people over there, actually. They were slightly different to the people I'd met before in the sense that they were more left-leaning. Some free spirits, but I definitely learned a lot from them. They were good people, and it was a great experience all around. And I think I earned about, £3,000 a year, something ridiculous, but which was fine in Hungary back then. That was a good wage, and that did me fine. And I actually remember just thinking back, I got paid my monthly wages. I had to go into a darkened room to get my monthly wages, and some elderly Hungarian woman would count out the cash. So I'm sure it was all legit, don't get me wrong, but it was an interesting experience. And International House, it was a great organization, and that was fantastic. So I spent overall a year and a half in Budapest. After about a year there, I started to think about my next move, and I had a girlfriend over there from New Zealand. She'd just actually finished something called the JET program a year or two before. And she told me all about it, and it sounded fantastic. It was basically, it's quite a prestigious program, actually. It's run by the Japanese government, and you have to get your application in by November, I think, for intake the following summer. But you go for an interview. If they invite you for an interview, you go for an interview at the Japanese embassy in your home country. So obviously, I went down to Green Park area where the embassy was, and you didn't need any kind of previous teaching qualifications. I did have some, but I mean, you didn't actually need any. So, it was really popular with graduates. I took the interview down there, and they liked me. And if you get a position, they will literally plonk you in a state school in Japan. It could be a junior high school for 12 to 15-year-olds, or a senior high school for 15 to 18-year-olds. I ended up getting placed in a school for 15 to 18-year-olds, a senior high school, two of them actually, and the scheme itself was great. You could actually choose what sort of region you'd like to live in Japan. I really fancied Kyoto for the cultural aspect, and Osaka obviously it's quite close nearby, and the entertainment side of that was really good. So I didn't fancy Tokyo as such, and I didn't necessarily I want to live in a city at the time. So I didn't actually choose Kyoto City or Osaka City as a place I wanted to live in. I thought, well, let's choose Kyoto Prefecture, or the county where Kyoto is, and if I get in there, that's great. And so I actually ended up getting a position in the county beside Kyoto, which was fine. It was slap bang in the middle of Japan, and it's about two hours west of Tokyo, I would say, on the bullet train. And I lived in a town of about 60,000 people, more or less. It was called Nagahama. Literally Long Beach, actually, but there was not really any beach there. But anyway, there was by a very large lake, and I got put in two senior high schools, one of which was really sort of in the woods. Actually, it was in a small village north of where I lived, and I taught English to these kids, and that was 4 days a week, and I really did think I got to see a different side of Japan, one that I wasn't expecting. These kids were actually very naughty, but they were great kids, don't get me wrong, but they, a lot of them didn't really want to go too far away from where they lived. They were happy enough where they were. So learning English was sometimes a bit of a challenge for them. They didn't always have that great desire, but they were fantastic kids. And I didn't want to make the lessons too stressful for them. I just tried to make it fun for them. But as an example, some of them were, naughty in the sense that, we'd start a lesson and some girls might go to the plug socket and plug their hair straightener in and straighten their hair and put some makeup on it. And I was like, really? Is this allowed? But the teacher said, no, it's okay. They're very naughty students. If they're not making any too much noise, then it's fine. So I thought, okay. I hope nobody from the Japanese Ministry of Education is watching this, by the way. But anyway, it was a great school. The teachers were great. I learned Japanese to the best I could. Great experience. Life outside of the school was good too. The other school I had one day a week was more of the Japanese type education you'd probably imagine. It was you walked into the classroom. It was complete silence during the lesson. The children just learnt. Very teacher strict, and they just got on with things. They were very motivated, and so I got to see sort of both sides. So that was an incredible experience for me. And yes, I also became good friends with some of the other English teachers out there. Teachers obviously in our prefecture that were from the US or Canada, Australia, New Zealand. In fact, one of the girls from the US is now my wife, so that was handy. I enjoyed going to Kyoto and Osaka, etc. as well, and got some travel done. So after 3 years, I returned to the UK, and I still had quite a lot of Japanese yen at that point. So I thought, at this point, it was 2006, summer 2006. So I would have been about 28. So really had to start thinking about starting my career at this point. But I wasn't quite ready just yet. I thought, let's give it one more year. I've got one more year left, in my 20s, if you like, before I have to start to think about turning 30. So I really wanted to learn Spanish and a bit of French. So I thought, I spent a few months in Northern Ireland after I got back from Asia, and then basically decided to go to Argentina and study Spanish. So I essentially just bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires and studied Spanish at a language school. Took some private lessons in Spanish as well, spending the yen that I'd built up. And it was great, fine, I had a good time there as well. It was out there about 6 or 7 months. And I turned 29 in Buenos Aires. So I really, really did start thinking about starting my career at this point. So I went back home for the summer. I still had a little bit of savings left, but not too much. And I really wanted to go to Africa to learn French. And I had researched and I picked out Gabon, actually, as the country I really wanted to go to. But then I thought, look, I'm going to start applying for jobs here. I can't really, if I've got an interview, I can't really just fly back and forth from Gabon, whenever I want. So let's keep it simple. Let's go to Paris and study some French there as a bit of a last hurrah, if you like. And then if I'm lucky enough to get an interview, then it's not too bad. So just before I went to Paris in September, I actually made one of the best decisions I've ever made. So the JET program in Japan, it actually organizes a job fair every summer, I think in early September. And, companies come, either Japanese companies or Japanese recruiters, or companies that want to hire people that have either lived in Japan or could speak some Japanese, etc., etc. They come and pitch up in London for a day, and you can just go and speak to them, talk to them, hand them your CV, and see what's going on. So one of the companies was MUFG. So the guys, I spoke to the HR guys there. They were all British. Just had a chat with them, gave my CV, and didn't think too much more about it at the times. And then went off to Paris and found a place at I think it was the Institut Catholique de Paris to study French, which is interesting because I'm not even Catholic. But that was good, and I found a place. Thankfully, the receptionist there actually told me about a place to live. There was a priest who was going to rent out the top floor of his presbytery for like 120 euros a month. And it doesn't matter about today, but even in 2007, that was an absolute bargain. So I found a place I rented his place out in northern Paris, and studied French, and that's it. Really. Not too much more to say about that experience, but it was all fine and good. About 6 weeks in, when I was living in Paris, I got an email, and it was from MUFG, and it was from the HR department, and they said, "Look, Stuart, our planning division is looking for someone with your type of background. Would you like to come up and talk to us and have a chat?" And I, of course, immediately wrote back, "Yes, absolutely." So I got on a bus, I think it was, actually, to save money, and it might have even been an overnight bus, and got into London, a little bit groggy, I think, in the morning, but the adrenaline was really starting to pump. I was getting ready for my interview at MUFG, and then about 1 hour before the interview, I got a call saying, "I'm sorry, we're going to have to call this off for until next week. Can you come back next week?" So I got the bus back to Paris, slightly deflated, but next time when I went up the next week, I splurged and got the Eurostar and went up to my interview. So the interview itself, it was a little bit different. It was two Japanese members of staff came with a British member of the HR team. And I didn't honestly realize how senior the Japanese guys were until afterwards. But this was the general manager of the planning division and his deputy. And in the bank, the general manager of planning is actually number 2 to the CEO. So I found out later this was actually a bit of a unique role, although it was a very junior position. Don't get me wrong; it was basically the first rung on the ladder. But they were looking for somebody to become the first ever non-Japanese member of staff in the planning team. They had never had a non-Japanese member of staff before. So we did the interview. They came in, and Kazusa-san, who was the general manager, I remember him coming in and saying, "Hello, Mr. Junk. Yep, sit down." So I was immediately put in my place, and then we did the interview, and they tested. Well, before that, I should say, I did something to prepare for that interview, which I thought was really useful. I hadn't actually read about it. It's just something I thought would be useful, and it did turn out to be useful. I wrote out a list of sound bites, basically, about things that I really wanted to say in the interview. How could I sell myself? How could I put myself in the best possible light? I don't really remember exactly what I wrote, but things like, what was I proud of that I wanted to tell these people? And one of them, I think, was I'd got in all my modules at university, I'd got a 2-1 or above. And sure enough, I read all the sound bites, and so they were swirling around my head, and they just came out naturally over the course of the interview. Sure enough, as part of the interview, Kazusa-san it was very direct for a Japanese person. He basically asked me, I don't know how he phrased it, but do you have the intellectual capacity to work for this bank? So thankfully, I had an answer straight ready for him. I said, well, actually, I got a 2-1 or above in all my modules at university. So I think this demonstrates that I've got the intellectual capacity for this role, or something like that. And I was ready for that. And they tested my Japanese. The deputy spoke German. I spoke a bit of German to them. And then I remember Kazusa-san gave me the longest pause I have ever encountered in any meeting or any interview in my life. He basically folded his arms and looked up, raised his eyebrows, and just looked up and mulled over things. And it must have been about 20 seconds. And believe me, when you're in an interview and 20 seconds is an eternity. So it was incredible. So he had a good think, and because I'd lived in Japan, obviously, I just shut up and let the guy just have a think. And whenever he was ready to speak, then he could speak. And then he started to speak again. And this time he spoke more in terms of envisaging me in the role and how it might work out. And then I thought, I've got a bit of a chance here. So that was the interview, and I ended up getting the job, and it was fantastic. I couldn't get over it, to be honest with you. And after I got the job, a few months down the line, I asked both the British HR member of staff and the Japanese deputy why they hired me, actually. And the British member of staff from HR said, look, that interview was batshit crazy, basically. So you were able to adapt. I couldn't get over how well you adapted to what was a really weird and crazy interview. So that was good. And then the Japanese member of staff, the deputy of Kazusa-san, his name was Fukuzumi-san. He basically just said, well, everyone else banged on about the salary. So you didn't actually mention what salary you wanted. So, that was a big bonus. And I didn't. I mean, I was just happy to be there, and they appreciated that. And so I got the job anyway. And I became the first ever non-Japanese member of staff and planning team. And yes, going forward, I will. I'll talk a bit about my career, but I will whiz through this to some extent, because I guess I'm sure. I don't think everyone on this call is, a business undergraduate, probably from different faculties. So I'm not going to go deep into, banking or what my career was. But in a nutshell, so I started the planning team. I worked there for about 4.5 years. It was me and 12 Japanese people. So it was a bit, again, like stepping into Japan every day. We spoke more in English in the beginning. I think they wanted me to feel comfortable. But as time went on, we spoke more and more Japanese. What did they get me to do? They wanted me to be a bit of a middleman between planning division and consultants like KPMG and PwC. They had projects going on where they looked at the organizational structure of the bank and what they could do to change it. And I was like a link man between the planning team and the consultants. They got me to, I spent time training. I spent time with each of the expatriate bankers, just learning how a corporate bank works, basically, and all the divisions, etc. They also got me to be a role I thought was small but quite interesting. They got me to do the secretariat for the executive committee meetings. So that's a meeting where it's like a board meeting. It's where the CEO sits down with the 12 general managers of the bank on a weekly basis, and they talk through everything. So they got me to come in and literally take the minutes, prepare the documents, and get everything ready for them. But it was just really interesting just being in the room and seeing how those guys operated and how they resolved issues. So after about 4.5 years, I thought I wanted to see further around the bank. And so my colleagues suggested operations. So operations is basically the back office of the bank. It's where the trades are processed. I didn't actually, I got a role there. I didn't actually do any processing myself. They used me in slightly different ways, but the good thing about operations was it sort of connected to lots of different parts of the bank. So that was good. And at the start, they got me working on a project where we moved our Middle East headquarters from Bahrain to Dubai. And then I worked in the systems help desk for about 6 months. And then for the rest of my time there, I they got me to be like an operations liaison. So I sort of represented operations to the wider world, especially our branch network. We had strong contacts with Dubai branch and Paris branch. I was like a liaison there. And also to one London front office. And so when I say front office, that's one of the client-facing divisions. In January 2020, I was actually nominated for an MUFG Excellent Award, which is great. And then in February 2020, I got called into a room by my manager and he said, "I'm sorry, Stuart, but we're going to make you redundant." So you probably weren't expecting me to say that, actually, but that's what he said. He said, "I'm sorry, but your department is going to cease to exist shortly. So we don't actually have a role for you anymore. So we're sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. And here's your severance. And wish you the best of luck." So after getting over the initial shock, I did what any sane and logical person would do. I started, and sorry, this is where your network is so crucial. I started looking around, asking people that I knew if they knew of anything. There were two senior managers in the London front office, the client-facing office, that I knew quite well. And when I spoke to them, they said, "Yeah, we're sorry. We actually already do. We found out that your department is going, and yeah, we're sorry." And I said, "Yeah, just if you know anything, guys, just let me know." And they said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely. All the best, son." So that was fine. But then I remember I took a quick walk around the block, I think shortly after that conversation, just to get a bit of fresh air for 5 minutes. And I remembered, actually, I didn't give these guys my CV. I completely forgot. I mean, it's the very least I can do is, show them this. So I went back in and emailed them both, sent them my CV. And within 5 minutes, one of them wrote back to me saying, "Sorry, I just read your CV. I mean, you did this? You've been here, you've learned this, et cetera, et cetera." I had no idea. And he then said, "Listen, give Andre Reich in Amsterdam a call because he needs somebody like you, somebody with your background." So I gave Andre a call in Amsterdam, our Amsterdam subsidiary. And a few conversations later, 2-3 weeks later, I was offered a role at MUFG Amsterdam. And I'm still there now. So that was almost 1 year ago. But yeah, it was, did I get lucky? Maybe of course, to a certain extent. But I've been working in Amsterdam now, working in transaction banking for nearly a year. So I'm in the front office now. So bizarrely, I got effectively a bit of a promotion out of this and a higher salary. So it actually worked out being very well. But when I was told about the redundancy, this was literally 2 weeks before COVID hit. The timing was absolutely horrendous. And firms are starting to shut down recruitment. So I was very, very lucky in that respect that I got this role. But I've been working in Amsterdam nearly a year now. And the crazy thing is, because of the pandemic, I have been in Amsterdam for a total of 4 days. I have conducted all my meetings over video or telephone conference call. I've been in Amsterdam for 4 days, and that was December. And so that's the only time I've got to meet my boss in the flesh. And only 1 or 2 members of the team. There are members of my team I haven't even actually physically met yet. It is absolutely crazy, but it's going as well as it can do. And they're a good bunch of people. It's a very international team. There's a couple of Dutch people, and a Japanese person, a Russian lady, a French lady, and myself. So it's nice and international, and it's great. What is transaction banking? I'll really condense this because I understand there's not not everyone's going to be a business graduate, but basically in a nutshell, corporates, particularly multinational corporates, have periods when they have quite a large amount of cash. And if it's a truly big multinational, it's not just, we're talking tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of euros. Why do they have this cash? They need, there could be occasions where they've got an AGM coming up and they need to pay dividends to their shareholders. They could have a bond issuance where they, take corporate debt and gather cash that way, or they could be thinking about taking over a company and they need to get cash in that way. So there are periods when multinational corporations have a large amount of cash and they need to put it somewhere. They need to earn a little bit of money in this cash. So it's there are other parts to my role, like trade finance and supply chain finance, but not going into those now. This is the cash side of the role, and it's our team's job to help solicit these deposits, basically. And if we find out that a corporate wants to deposit money with us, we'll go and speak to the traders, find out how much, what interest rate we can provide to the customer, maybe add a little bit of incentive, of maybe a bonus point, sorry, not a basis point here. A basis point is sort of not 1%. So add a few basis points as incentive and see if we can get these deposits. There are other parts of the role on the cash side, like cash management, where we help corporates pull their profits in from their branches worldwide. We can set up systems which helps that to happen. But again, I'll not go too deep into that for this session. And that's what I'm doing up until now, basically. So let me wrap up by 4 things that I would say to my 22-year-old self after all that. Basically, I thought of 4 things, really, and I'll refer a little bit more closely to my notes here because I guess that's the whole crux of this session. But 4 things I thought. Most generally, first of all, I think, and again, this is all just my opinion, but I think life is a marathon and not a sprint. It's easy to, but don't burn yourself out in your 20s. This is arguably the most exciting time of your life. Once you finish education, you are free really to do whatever you want. I understand there are student debts, don't get me wrong, and completely take that into consideration. But it's a time where I still think you can take risks, whether that be starting your own business or living abroad or whatever. It's a time when I think you can really take risks in your life because you do have time. Life does take a very long time, and I think you can maximize that. And I think try not to base all your decisions on money. Of course, we all want money. We all want money. It's how we get by. But I've actually met quite a number of senior people at my bank, and don't get me wrong, they do a very good job. But not all of them are very happy. If you want to earn big money, then that's fine. And maybe, we all have goals of doing this, don't get me wrong. But you will have to make sacrifices if you want to work you up into a properly senior position and earn some serious money. And banking is quite a lucrative business. But when I say sacrifices, I mean you'll not be able to get away with just working 9 to 5 every day and working way up high. You will be expected to come back with answers. You'll be expected to sacrifice your time and work late in the evening, maybe not every evening, but you'll have to sacrifice your time, particularly to work your way up. There's a lot of competition as well, but obviously not impossible. And it may work out really well for you in that respect. And who knows what will happen in the future. But also, as you get older as well, you'll start married and start to have kids, and you'll have to think about balancing that. Balancing your lifestyle there. Also, living abroad, I get living abroad isn't for everyone. Of course, it's not. Completely understand that, and we are, of course, living in a pandemic world. It's not like you can just jet off to wherever you want to at the moment. But we're all hopeful that this is going to end sooner rather than later. So, imagining that we're now in a non-pandemic world. Living abroad, I thought was a really good thing to do for me to do. But I thought, if nothing else, it can actually just buy you a little bit of time. If you don't know exactly what you want to do yet, you could consider teaching English abroad. And I guarantee, if you are a native speaker of English, or if you speak English to a very good level, which I'm sure everyone in this call does, I guarantee you will find a job abroad. I traveled around China for about 6 weeks, and I must have been offered about 7 or 8 jobs just walking around the street. Can you teach my kids? Can you come into our company and teach English? They weren't even looking for any qualifications. So really, it's something to consider. If you maybe you want to teach English on a permanent basis, fine. But if you want to, have it more of a think, it's an option anyway. And I learned a lot from being abroad. It definitely broadened my perspectives, whether that be my time in Germany when I saw the other continental European students not graduating until later. So thinking maybe I could add some time here, or living in Japan and living in that sort of non-aggressive, very polite, but slightly hierarchical culture of Japan. I learned a lot there. And you meet all types of people while you're abroad, from rich and poor. And I'm definitely a better person for it. It broadened my perspectives immensely. Finding a job when you do want to look for a job, in a nutshell, I think if you have any kind of differentiating skill, or a skill that sets you, makes you a little different from the rest, leverage the hell out of it. Basically, it could make great strides in getting you a role. When I went to the job fair that JET were organising in London in the summer 2007, I knew that I was basically cutting out about 98% of the job market. Those guys were looking for people who had lived in Japan, or et cetera, et cetera. And so if you have any differentiating skill, definitely leverage it. Or if you don't, but you could look at getting one. I mean, in my bank, for example, there are senior relationship managers who studied music. I remember being in a meeting with RBS one time. There was a senior guy from Treasury. He'd read history at university. So you can end up, you never know where you're going to end up, basically. And finally, work itself. I think your most important relationship at work is with your immediate line manager. That is a key relationship, and if that's not a good relationship, then other things can sort of collapse quickly. So concentrate on getting your relationship with your immediate manager just right. What your managers and your colleagues as well, I guess, are looking for are just get the basics right. In my opinion, will you be on time for the meeting? Will you meet your deadlines? And if you can't meet a deadline, fine, just tell people. Don't over-promise and under-deliver. You want to under-promise and over-deliver. And I actually asked Kazusa-san, who was the general manager of planning division, who interviewed me at the time, his tips before he left to go back to Japan. I asked him, basically, did he have any advice for me generally, career or anything? And he gave me a couple of pointers. He said, make yourself as valuable as possible to your immediate team. And what's important actually is you as a person, your values, what kind of person you are, because that will shine through and you will be respected a lot for it. So does that apply to just Japanese organizations? I don't think so. I think it applies across the board. And I thought that was really good advice. And very finally, when you're in the workplace and you're working with people, you want to try to, if you're looking to try and get on with people generally, find out what makes them tick. People love speaking about their kids, for example. Some people might like getting their ego massaged a bit. All things, ways you can get on with people, and that may help you build your network. And that's it really. Your network is very important, not just to maybe get a promotion work, but as I've just explained earlier, if you suddenly find that you suddenly don't have a job when you weren't expecting it, your network can be absolutely crucial. So get on LinkedIn if you're not there already. Make sure you've got your CV, etc. on there, and just network as much as you can generally. And yes, that is basically it for my talk. I hope you find some of that relevant or useful. I hope so anyway. If not, I'm incredibly sorry. But thank you so much for inviting me, Derek, and everyone on to give this talk here today. And yeah, thank you so much.
Stuart, an exceptional presentation, very well crafted. And I particularly liked your point is at the end of your presentation. What I do is I normally ask a question myself, but I know that the students are eager to ask questions from the student community. Just before I hand over, two of the things you talked about are on my bucket list. One, I want to go to the Hotel Budapest. Right, that's definitely want to do that, and I definitely want to get to Japan. So they're two of my goals. But I'll hand over to the students. If you can just put your hand up, we'll start off with Gina. Did you have any problems changing the environment? Did you have any problems changing the environment so many times? What do you think was the most challenging thing? So I guess with that question there is working in lots of different countries, how did you adapt? And what did you find challenging?
Great question. And every country, I think, had its own challenges. For example, in Japan, the Japanese people were wonderful, don't get me wrong, but no matter how well you spoke Japanese, how fluently, etc., you would never really be completely 100% accepted there. And I don't mean that in too bad a way, but you would always be looked on to some degree as a non-Japanese person or a foreigner, if you like. But don't get me wrong either. They were wonderful people and very polite, but each country had its own challenges. And as time went on, I felt I was able to deal with those challenges better. I certainly found working in the German office in the beginning quite hard because that was my first experience in an office. It was also in a foreign language. And yes, I had studied German a good bit before, but it certainly wasn't fluent. And that was tough. And you learn things on the way. Just try not to let things get to you too much. And it's all a learning process, really. So every place I lived in had its own challenges, but I thought the learning how to adapt was a key benefit of living abroad, putting yourself in those different situations. I mean, not even just workplace. I don't know if I should say this. When I was traveling back from Japan through Asia, I got robbed at knife point in India. And obviously that's not great. It was fine, but I lost almost everything. And that I was put in a massive crisis situation, one that really I hadn't had experience of before. I lost, I had to change. I had just enough money in my backpack back at my hostel to change my flight from Mumbai to Calcutta to get home. But I had to do a week in India with very, very little to live on. And yes, of course, it was horrible at the time. But looking back, just the experience of living through a real crisis moment like that helped me immensely, I think. But yes, that's a random sort of answer to your question. But yeah, it's a learning process.
Okay, we've got a question from Petra. If you could go back now to your university time, would you work more on any certain personal skills and values? Could you give us some advice on what you would focus on in terms of professional and personal development?
I think everyone is different, and you're always going to have everyone has got a different personality. And I mean, at the end of the day, if we all had the same personality, it'd be very boring. So we've all got our little foibles and we've all got our weaknesses. Absolutely. I know my own. But you learn as you get older, just from, experiencing life, or however you want to call it. I don't know. But if I could go back, no, I think the first 2 years of university were, I'm not sure if easy is the right word, but you were put into a situation where you're put in there with other people your own age. And well, actually, it's not easy at all in many respects because you don't know who you're going to be living with, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think your personality changes really, at any, properly, no matter how old you get. What I think changes is your outlook and your perspectives, and that's it doesn't matter. You could be living abroad, or you could be staying in the UK doing different things. But as you get older, I think it's your perspectives that change, and not so much your personality. So what I'm trying to say is, don't worry too much about your, how you'll just learn as you get on, and treat everything as a learning curve.
Okay, Jake, would you like to ask a question?
Hi there, Stuart. Thank you for that. There were just a couple of points that I wanted to ask about. Firstly, sure. In regards to, I think it was Budapest, you said that the people there were more left-leaning. I was just wondering if political ideology came into was important in developing relationships or developing communications with businesses. And another one, when you were speaking about, I think it was your work in Japan, you used the phrase "used me" a couple of times for them getting you to do things. Just some clarification on that. They specific used me instead of the actual job role.
Yes, great questions. On the first one on left-leaning people, I don't know how much of an influence it had on later life and career, etc. I just found, like I think I said something like there were some free spirits there, and they took a very holistic approach to life. It's hard to sort of pin down what that actually means anyway, but they were more liberal, and they took life as it came a lot of times. And although I'm working in sort of a corporate environment now, I just thought that was it was the first time I'd sort of met people like that, and they were just generally good to talk to. They were not very not everyone's like that, but they were very knowledgeable, they were well read. Because some of them, these guys were in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It was a learning experience for me. And on your second point, you used me. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I was always trying to make myself as useful as possible. Again, make myself as valuable as possible to the team, if you like. So yes, I did use the phrase "use me" quite a bit. Yes, that's true. I would also say that at the same time, I did try and put myself forward wherever I could, where they didn't have an idea of having me employed there to do. If I saw an opportunity somewhere, I would also do that as well. But I think I said "use me" basically because I do have this. This goes back to personality again. I do have a tendency to try and please people as much as I can, and to get on with people and be approachable, etc., etc. So yeah, a bit of both, but yeah, that's basically what I meant by that.
Fantastic, okay. Stuart. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
We've got time to squeeze in one more question. So Thanos, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. Stuart, first of all, thank you for this amazing presentation. I really love your energy, and you have a very fascinating life story. Amazing, like Thanks. All the travels and all the. So I worked abroad. I worked like in the States for a couple of years, and I decided to come back in the UK and finish my master's. So I wanted to ask you. I worked like mostly in the music industry, but like I did other jobs as well in other industries. So I wanted to ask you: do you believe, like, in your mind, do you believe expertise is important on like keep like engaging and doing different things, and how will you approach this, like in your
the idea of expertise? I mean, yeah, obviously having expertise. If you have expertise in something, that is fantastic. Because it'll help you get a job in a particular role. Because if your expertise in something, that's obviously taking a lot of people out of the your competition in the job market. So that again, it goes back to leveraging that. And having expertise, if it's something that you really enjoy doing, then you're very lucky, because not everyone's in that position. If you have expertise in something that you really love, that's a great thing, and you should use it as much as possible. That would be my words there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And I know this was, sorry, yeah, I know this is the last part of the presentation. But before we wrap up, please, if anyone wants to network, get in touch via LinkedIn, please do feel free. More than happy. If you're related to the University of Sunderland in any shape or form, I will more than happily accept an invitation on LinkedIn. So do feel free to do that. If you want to talk further or whatever, please do reach out.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Stuart, a final point you did mention about differentiating. Now, the students have to do a 60-second presentation, and that's what I want them to look at. How do you differentiate yourself, and why should you be considered? But Stuart, if the students stay online, because I've got some information to give you about the Project Changemaker. But Stuart, thank you very much indeed. And I can't believe I was that strict with the students back in 2000.
You're a good guy, right? Don't you worry, Derek. But thank you so much. Thanks, Derek, and thanks everyone for listening. Thank you.
We'll keep in touch. Take care. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Right, I'm just stopping the recording there, and then I'm going to give you some information about project. Yeah, stop.